the next 5 years, it's going to be a very uphill battle, a very sustained struggle to get it into the schools, and that in that sustained struggle in the next 5 years, maybe even longer, we're going to have to attend to some of the stuff that I was talking about earlier, effectively speaking about what it is and what it does and what its intended outcomes are, and how it can actually very easily be part of the official curriculum, without it losing its soul. Because I don't think that it's difficult to integrate. If you really think about what this society and what our school systems profess to be about, the missions, if you read a lot of the mission statements of colleges, of school districts, it's about equity, it's about diversity, it's about respecting multiculturalism, it's about creating a more inclusive democratic society, about perfecting the ideals that this society was founded on, although I would question whether the ideals that we now put forth as the ideals the country was founded on was really the ideals those gentlemen had in mind. But I would say that the difficulty is not going to be in making it part of the curriculum. I don't think that that's as difficult as having to convince the gatekeepers, of having to struggle against those that would question why this, or isn't this reverse racism, or isn't this just another form of ethnocentrism? Why should Chicanos or blacks or Asians or women or gays have a different curriculum that meets their needs? I think Christine Sleeter hits this really well in something she writes when she's going over the research, where she talks about the official curriculum right now is really white Eurocentric studies. It's white ethnic studies. It's the history of a particular group or a particular conception of a group, white people, which is somewhat problematic, but it's a particular history that's already packaged. And our ability to articulate that, I think, is going to be the struggle. And I think it's going to be a hard struggle, as I think the political campaigns for president are showing us right now. There is a lot of hostility out there for things that a lot of people would have, I'm not going to say we would have imagined were behind us in this society. Stuff is starting to surface that's always been there. Beliefs and values that have never really gone away about what this country's about and who it's for and what people's righteous positions are starting to surface. So I see it as a very difficult struggle in the next 5 years. And I'll be honest with you, I really don't have a sense of where it'll be. Now, in my more optimistic imaginings, in my optimistic visions, if you will, 5 years from today, I want to see it. I want to. I don't even say I see it. I want to see it integrated sufficiently within K through 12 curriculum, so that it is having an impact on students, so that by the time students are graduating from high school, they have a clearer, a more comprehensive understanding of what has been the history of this society, of this country, how it's positioned differing groups in different locations, and how those groups have always had to operate from those inferiorized positions, and that has a direct effect on what exists today, and that has a direct result on the life chances, on the opportunities that are available to people. That's what I would hope for. I would hope that it is a part of requirements. I would hope that it's not just electives. I would hope that it's in a place where the biggest question is, how do we continue growing? How do we continue expanding? That's what I would hope for 5 years from today. You mentioned a few minutes ago that, for example, the governor hasn't signed, and that in some districts it isn't a requirement, it's an elective. And this is where, again, I think the ability for teachers, for its advocates, to effectively articulate in a more mainstream language what ethnic studies does, okay, what it is, and what its intended outcomes are in terms of student achievement and attainment, will have a long way to go in whether the faculty or just a particular department, the history department at such and such a high school, votes to make it a requirement instead of keeping it a mere elective. That will be integral to where it is 5 years from today. So, and that's in the sense that I think it's a very uphill battle right now, because a lot of groundwork needs to be done to contest, because if there's something that I think we shouldn't for a moment forget, is that as ethnic studies and decolonizing pedagogy have been signaling, ethnic studies from its very beginning, is that discourses, logics, narratives, worldviews, cosmologies, epistemologies of a colonial past are not over. They have extended into the present. To cite one of the spatial theorists I read somewhere along the line years ago, the past is not fully past. And so you have people that maybe are not even necessarily anti-people of color, they're not necessarily anti-equality, they're not necessarily anti the advancement of dominated groups or the equalization of dominated groups, but they are interpolated by those discourses and how those logics, those narratives, those epistemologies that have filtered, that have remained in the present, and because of that may contest it, may think it's reverse racism, and not coming from a racist position, but they actually would be easily convinced it is reverse racism, or it's not fair, or why do we need to spend resources on this? So in that sense, again, I see it as an uphill battle. I'm optimistic, obviously. I have to be optimistic, because if I'm not optimistic, then I might as well crawl under this table and just go to sleep.